it's been 25 years since the Newbury Medal-winning dystopian novel The Giver first came out. According to a summary written by the author herself, it's written from the point of view of 11-year-old Jonas, who lives in a futuristic society that has eliminated all pain, fear, war, and hatred. There's no prejudice and little competition, since everyone looks and acts basically the same, and everyone is unfailingly polite. The society has also eliminated choice. You know the rest of the story. A few years ago, it was made into a feature film. More recently, Lowry helped make The Giver into a graphic novel. It's also been named one of America's 100 best-loved novels by PBS's The Great American Read. Lois Lowry, it's great to meet you. Thanks so much for being here. Congratulations, by the way, on the 25th anniversary and this Great American Read honor. If you wrote The Giver today, as opposed to then, would it be the same?
Oh boy, interesting question. No, of course it would be different because it's 25 years later. Things are more complicated now than they were then.
So when a person comes up to you on the street, which I'm sure they do all the time, and said, oh, I read this book, it's great, it's a very different time. 93, Bill Clinton is sworn in, don't stop thinking about tomorrow, as opposed to 2018. Does the reader, do you believe, consume The Giver differently in 2018 than he or she did in 1993?
The reader is still young, I assume. When the book came out, people read it when they were 14 or so. Today, their kids are 14, and those are the kids that are reading it, and they're reading it in a different context. You mentioned 1993 and Bill Clinton, and I sort of came up short because I had forgotten that. Hadn't forgotten Bill Clinton, but I hadn't put it in context. To me, one of the important things was the first Gulf War, which was 1991. I had a son in that war. So everything was very personal to me then, and it still would be, but in a different context.
You know, I've read a number of interviews with you in which you say, and it's hard when you're just reading in print, emphatically to me, that you're not in the message-sending business, that this was not about, well, it looks like I'm right here.
Yes.
But when you read this book, the messages are so powerful, I almost find that hard to believe.
Well, the thing is, when I'm writing a story, that's what I'm writing,
the story.
Plot. I'm trying to make an interesting story so that the reader will turn the pages. If I start superimposing a message, which is what I want them to think, it changes the whole thing, and the reader resents it. The reader is going to get a message, but it's going to come from himself, not from me.
So, so many different formats. The book, the graphic version, I talked about an opera, the movie, which I love, with Jeff Bridges and Meryl Streep. What does it feel like knowing that tens and tens of millions of people have shared this story? And by the way, as you said, I love the generational thing. Obviously, I haven't thought about it. And the next, what does that feel like?
It's really kind of overwhelming. It's certainly something I could never have anticipated, couldn't have planned to have happen. It's been quite phenomenal. And but what affects me most is and I still get letters, emails every day from 50, 60 people. And what affects me is the individuals, the child who's affected in some personal way, the child in Turkey who writes to me, or France, or Georgia, or whatever. Not the kid who writes, this is assignment for school, tell me all the similes and metaphors in it, but the kid who says, this touched me because of who I am.
Well, that's a beautiful thought, and I can understand that, but it's not. It seems to me that it's not just touching people as I know it did. It also encouraged people to read. I mean, I'm sure a la the Harry Potter books, you've heard from thousands of... No, I mean, I'm talking about The Giver, though, when they've said the same thing. This is what encouraged me. And there's a beautiful thing from The Great American Read. I want you to watch, if people haven't seen. This is Francis, a prisoner who read The Giver in his prison book club. Here he is.
Jonas was a hero. I don't consider myself a hero, but I think what I'm doing now by getting his GED, educating myself.
Okay.
I'm become a hero.
I become a hero. That is so
Isn't
beautiful.
That wonderful?
It's incredible. So what does that do for you when someone says, I wasn't much of a reader before, or like Francis says, what does that do for you?
It makes me tear up, even here on your show. It's very moving.
Yeah, it is very moving. So you're on The Great American Read's Top 100 Novels.
How did that happen? I don't know who made that list.
Real people voted, I want you to know, Lois. This is not concocted in some back room.
You promised me
So
that.
are you voting in this thing?
Sure I will.
What other great
You know,
novels
the
would you
one
vote
that
for?
leaped out at me because it affected me when it was published, and I was a young housewife with 4 young children, was The Handmaid's Tale. And I didn't watch the
I was just
Hulu
gonna ask you,
version.
does
I
that seem
haven't
to-
seen that. I remember the book.
Are there other books on the 100 that have meant a lot to you in your
There are
life?
some that I hate. Sorry,
tell me
but
one or
no,
two.
no,
Why
I'm
can't
not.
you do
No,
that?
my lips are sealed.
You want to spell the author's name backwards? No one will ever know. So give me another one or two that really meant a lot to you.
Well, this one meant a lot to me because of my children. Charlotte's Web. I mean, you probably have children.
Oh, of course I
Yeah,
do. I
yeah.
have 2 now in their 20s.
Yeah. So there are those tearjerkers that you loved for various reasons. I can't remember the whole list, I'm
that's
afraid.
perfectly- You know, I'm sure you've only been, let's assume it sold, 12, 13 million copies, so I assume you've been asked 13 million times about the ending. So it's ambiguous, as
I
everybody
left
knows.
it ambiguous on purpose. Some kids hate that. And then several years later, I began to write books, not sequels, but books that followed it. So there are now 4. Every question you had from the first book is answered by the 4th book. And a 5th question that people ask is, what happened to the community after the boy fled? And that is explained in the new 25th anniversary edition of The Giver, which has some additional material that I put at the end.
When you mentioned the 25th anniversary, which is how I started. When you finished this thing and sent it in, what were your expectations of this? What were your hopes for this? I mean, you've written dozens, I assume people
I had
know.
written dozens of books before
I
The
know that.
Giver. I've written dozens since, but that one did stand
Did you
out.
know this was something that
No,
was going
I
to
knew
grab?
it was different from my others, which made me a little apprehensive because, of course, people want you to write the same book over and over again. If they liked your first book, they'd like 12 more just like it. And this was very different. So I didn't know what to expect, and it's been an amazing sequence of events.
I want you to know it's getting one of my votes. Lois, it's an
Thank
honor
you.
to meet you. Thank
Thank
you
you.
so much. Wonderful book, wonderful work. The next episode of The Great American Read airs tonight at 8 o'clock right here on WGBH. The finale on Tuesday, October 23rd. You can still weigh in on your favorite books